Okay, let's have a look at factorizing trinomials. So it's just something that you're going to have to practice a little bit, and that's okay. It will get better. A lot of students don't like this, but let's have a look. Okay, so first of all, is it always a trinomial when there's three terms? That's three terms, but that's definitely not a trinomial. We can't factorize it. It is a trinomial in that there's three terms, but we can't factorize using the specific methods in how we factorize trinomials. Okay, so it needs to take on a specific form. It needs to be a term that is being squared. So, for example, y that is being squared. Then that same term that's being squared, so if I've got y squared, then I've got y to the power of 1. And then we need a constant, say 4, whatever. So we've got something like a y to the power of 2, that same variable y to the power of 1, and then we've got a constant. Then it takes on the form of a trinomial. Okay, it is important to understand those basics because the moment that we start changing variables, or for example, I give you something like this, y to the power of 4 minus 3. And then students say, oh, I don't know if I can factorize that. Yes, we can because it takes on the same form. We've got y to the power of 4, and then we've got y to the power of 2. So the second one is a square root of the first one. Then it is also a trinomial. It's a little bit of theory. I hope that's not too confusing. You will get better at spotting that as we go. So is that first one a trinomial? We've got a term that's being squared. Then the middle term is to the power of 1. So it's the square root of x squared. So yeah, it works. And then we've got a constant. So how do we factorize for a trinomial? It breaks up into two sets of brackets. We take the factors of the constant term. In this case, 2 can just break up into 2 and 1. And then we ask ourselves, how can we play around with 2 and 1? How can we add or subtract them that it gets us back to the middle term of positive 3? Well, it will have to be plus 2 and plus 1 to get us back to plus 3. So then x, we get the square root, goes into the brackets, and then we put those factors in, plus 2 and plus 1. And you can check grade 9s, if you FOIL that back out, it will get us back to that trinomial, and then we know that it is correct. Okay, let's look at the second one. First, we have to ask ourselves, is it a trinomial? That can we use it can we factorize it by using this method? Yes, we can. We have y squared. Then we've got y to the power of 1. So the square root of that is y, which is great. And then we've got a constant. Okay, perfect. So let's get the factors of that constant. It will be 8 and 1 and 4 and 2. And that's all, hey. Then we ask ourselves, how do we play around with these factor pairs, adding and subtracting them to get us back to the middle term of negative 2? Okay, 8 plus 1, no. 8 minus 1, no, that's definitely not going to work. Can 4 and 2 help us? Well, it will have to be a negative 4 plus 2. Can you see that your integers is going to be important with this? So there we have y, and then we have minus 4, and then plus 2. If you FOIL this out, you will see that you get back to that trinomial. Okay, so far so good. Let's look at number 3. Well, there's 3 terms, so it's a trinomial, but does it take on the specific form that it needs to be in so that we can use this method of factorization? So first of all, we have to go change the order. Let's go write the squared term first. Make sure that you keep its sign. And then we got the x term, and then we've got the constant term. Okay, great. But now there's something very important. Do you remember that we need a positive value there in front? The coefficient of that x squared term needs to be positive. So what are we going to do to make that happen? Well, we can take out a common factor of negative 1. Then we're going to have that. That sign will change, and this sign will change. We didn't change to the expression when we do this, because think about this. If we multiply that negative 1 back in, it's going to land us back where we were. So we're not making changes, we're just manipulating it and writing it in a way in which we want it to look so that we can work with it. So carry that. Now we can factorize that one. What do we need to do? We need the factors of 15. 15 and 1, 5 and 3, and I think that's all. Hey, okay, let's play around with those factor pairs to see how are we going to get back to negative 1. Well, I think that's our best bet to get back to negative 1. Negative 5 plus 3. That will get us back to the middle term of negative 2. So let's put that in the square root of that first term, and then minus 5, and then plus 3. So when we multiply this out, grade 9s, it will get us back to that trinomial, which means we did it correctly. Okay, last trinomial practice. I hope it's been going well for you so far. This is an interesting trinomial because we've got x's and we've got y's. And if you look at it from left to right, it forms a trinomial because we've got x squared, x to the power of 1, and then no x, right? That's the right form. If you look at it from the right to the left, though, it's also a trinomial because you've got y squared, y to the power of 1, and then in the last term, no y. So it's a trinomial from both sides. Let's not overcomplicate it. So the best way that I would say to go factorize this is look at the variable. In this case, I'm going to look at x. So we're going to choose one variable. I'm going to look at the x variable because it's got a coefficient of 1. That's the one that we would want to look at. So I'm going to ignore the y just for a moment. So I'm going to ignore the y. I'm going to ignore the y. Now it looks like some of the more basic trinomials that we've been looking at. So let's factorize that one, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to bring the y back. If you haven't tried this already, make sure that you try it on your own first. So if I factorize that first one, I need the factor pairs of 15. 15 and 1, and 5 and 3. And we need to play around with them and see how we're going to get back to negative 8. It will have to be 5 and 3, and it will have to be minus to get us back to negative 8. So minus 5, minus 3, and then we bring back our y, our second variable. And you will see, grade 9s, if we then multiply those back out, it's going to get us back to the same trinomial. Let's quickly do that. If we FOIL that out, we're going to get x squared minus 3xy minus 5xy plus 15y squared. So if we put those two together, it's going to give us minus 8xy, and it is exactly the same trinomial, so we factorized it correctly. Make sure that you practice enough of these that you are comfortable with factorizing trinomials.